Today we're back with another brand new roundup of secrets, Easter eggs, and interesting details in Destiny 2 that you probably missed. Bungie's been sneakily hiding a bunch of stuff in Witch Queen, which we're going to talk about. In typical fashion, I've assembled a mountain of topics, which I could have made into 4 or 5 separate videos, but I've crammed them all into this one, so I hope you're ready for a lot of talking. If you're feeling particularly generous, clicking the like button down below would help me out a ton, but we've got a lot to get through today, so let's not waste any more time with intros and get right into it. So firstly, we've got to talk about this guy, Rhulk, who is probably one of the most interesting enemies in Destiny for a lot of reasons, and he's also connected to one of the most strange Easter eggs I've ever seen, which hasn't been fully figured out yet, but it has a lot of people confused. He's definitely one of the most unique bosses we've ever seen. He's not just a big Minotaur or a big Cabal or a Taniks, he's a completely new, separate alien from the typical 4 we've always seen. So if you've played the raid, you'll know he's a very aggressive boss and you can't really get close to him without being kicked into another dimension. But for some reason, Bungie hid a very interesting detail on him you can only see if you went right up close. Thankfully, a player called Lawson94 got a screenshot of where he actually froze in place, so they went up to him and stared into his eyes with snipers, and they got this traumatizing image for all of us to see. Now, for some reason, his eyes are actually made up of different symbols, which of course has everyone wondering, what do they actually mean? We know that Bungie love their Easter eggs and puzzles, especially in raids, so you know they did this for a specific reason, and his eyes are also always like this. They don't ever change with reset or based on your players or anything else. You can even see in these concepts that the artist drew the exact same symbols, so they're always fixed like this, but the question is, what do they actually mean? So you can see 4 suns, but the 2 interesting ones are on the right, and the top one is actually the symbol for Eris. If you know your astrology, you'll recognize that as a symbol for Eris, as in the 2nd biggest dwarf planet in our solar system. It's nearly the same size as Pluto, so it's almost like the 10th planet we have, but the one below it you may recognize as the Exo Stranger symbol. Now, this has been all over the game since Destiny 1. It's on her forehead, it's on her shoulder, it's on the quest icons in Beyond Light you probably recognize, it's on the Grimoire cards in Destiny 1. Also, both the Stranger's Rifle and the No Time to Explain in Destiny 1. This symbol has basically been all over the games for the entire time. So now is the question, why does he have symbols for Eris and the Stranger in his eyes? Why is he keeping an eye on them literally? It does make sense that these 2 characters, Eris and the Stranger, have both been the ones trying to persuade us to use the darkness and basically have been on Team Darkness. So it kind of implies maybe they're working for Rhulk or the Witness. It is weird there isn't one for the Drifter. He is also on that kind of Team Darkness trying to get us to use the dark powers, but I don't think he's been directly involved with the pyramid yet. So that could be why there's no symbol for him. It is a super strange and interesting one. It's funny how some designer deliberately wanted to put this here, knowing that it's basically impossible to get close enough to see those symbols in his eyes, so it probably wasn't expected to be discovered this quickly. But the bottom line, Eris and the Stranger seem to be both connected to the pyramids, and it's definitely implying something, the fact they're in his eyes. So do leave your comments down below. I want to see your theories and speculations of what you think is going on with these symbols. Now, Bungie also released some concepts of alternate and early versions of our old friend, the Witness, which look really cool. The design is definitely one of the weirdest we've ever seen in Destiny. As I touched on, even though he's definitely the character from this 5th race artwork, I don't think we're going to see a whole race of these guys just running around. I think it's just him by himself. But like Rhulk, I think they can just make up whatever aliens they want inside each of the pyramids. So they've got a license to do whatever they want. But you can see in all of these concept art, you can see he's got that signature black human body and the smoky spirits coming from his bald head. Now, speaking of being bald, I want to thank Keeps for sponsoring this video. You can get 50% off your first order with the link in the description. YouTube tells me that 90-something% of you guys watching are male, and 2 out of every 3 men experience hair loss by 35, which is actually a surprising stat. But thanks to science and Keeps, you can actually do something about it without ever leaving your home. It gets delivered straight to your door. There is no need to slap people for making fun of your hair. Keeps is an online subscription which is FDA approved and clinically tested and also backed by research. Most customers see results after about 6 months, and you also get included unlimited messaging with a 24/7 support team of licensed doctors if you have any questions, and they also have an award-winning thickening shampoo and conditioner with all natural ingredients. So if you're looking to stop hair loss or grow some back or just hold on to the hair that you do have, it's called Keeps for a reason, but hair loss stops with Keeps. You can get 50% off your first order if you go to keeps.com/unknownplayer or click the link in the description. That's keeps.com/unknownplayer. Back to the video. Next up, let's talk about our good old friend Rasputin. Haven't heard from him in a very, very long time, but Bungie's actually been dropping some pretty big hints in Witch Queen about a major role he's going to play in future content. So if you've done the quest for the exotic glaives, you might have skipped past some bits which actually mentioned some details about a new location called the Nefele stronghold. Apparently it's a location that Rasputin sent something important there and erased all data of the location to keep it secret. So he's hiding it for a reason. The way Bungie has worded it, it definitely seems like they're hinting that there's going to be some kind of important location. Now, as for the latest with Rasputin, he's actually currently downloaded into an engram, like a USB stick, when Mars got evacuated by the pyramids, but Anna Bray, who of course helped build him in the first place, is actually working on putting him into an exo body, so he's going to eventually become a kind of character, like an NPC, walking around with the rest of us. Apparently she's had a few failed attempts and it's quite difficult to put him into an exo, but the key to this could be in the Nefele stronghold, or maybe we'll end up going there with him. But what's interesting about what Bungie are doing here is that this is actually the exact same plotline that was in the original cut version of the Destiny 1 story. So before Destiny 1 got rebooted in 2013, it had a very, very different story with the characters all switched around. So the Crow was actually called the Crow back then, and he was kind of like a K6 character. The Exo Stranger was an apprentice to Osiris, and there was all kind of differences, but a big part was that Rasputin was actually an Exo that you had to go and rescue because he got kidnapped by the Hive and held on the Dreadnought. The Exo in this concept art is actually Rasputin himself, so this was the original plan for Rasputin to be an Exo, and then of course they changed it and they made him this war mine that was on this bunker on Mars. But now Anna putting him into an Exo body is definitely Bungie doing a callback. I don't know why, but deliberately trying to weave this original version of the lost story of Destiny 1 into the current narrative, which is really interesting. It's basically identical to what they did with Crow. Like I said, his name was actually Crow in the original version, and then they changed it and made him Uldren, the Queen's brother. But then, of course, they killed him in Forsaken and made him resurrected into the Crow, which was his original name. And now they're doing the exact same thing with Rasputin, which is really funny. I think it'll be good to see Rasputin as an Exo because it'll make him like an actual character in the world. You'll see him walking around and going on missions instead of just being this dormant machine just sitting on Mars. So it's going to be really good for the story, I think. It also touches on something you might remember. I covered how Felwinter was actually Rasputin as an Exo, so he could go around the world and gather data, but then he got revived by a ghost and accidentally became a guardian, which Rasputin of course didn't like, so he had to kill him with SIVA along with the Iron Lords. And that was the backstory to Rise of Iron. But Rasputin does control SIVA, and it's not necessarily evil, which can be programmed to do anything. It is possible we will see SIVA come back eventually at some point too, just like we saw those friendly frames going about, but it could also be how we get a Wrath of the Machine raid eventually down the line. I think we will see King's Fall as that returning Destiny 1 raid first, but I think at some point down the line we could see Wrath of the Machine come back, and if they do bring SIVA and the Splicers, they would need to be connected, so they can't bring back Wrath without bringing back the Splicers as well. Now, another major character that Bungie have confirmed will be returning at some point is Calus, one of my personal favorite characters, the big Cabal Emperor, but he is set to return, and he was mentioned quite a lot in Witch Queen. He's actually the main character behind the exotic grenade launcher mission that you might have played, the Vox Obscura. And the mission basically implies that he's joined the pyramids, he's become some kind of minion or maybe a disciple of the Witness himself, and he's also been infected and transformed by the darkness in some way, which is really interesting. We've seen that Calus has been trying to join the darkness and the pyramids and investigating them since he was introduced in 2017, so it does make sense. It does seem like where a story arc was going, but now it seems like he might have actually accomplished that, and that was what the Glycon mission with the Dead Man's Tale exotic mission was about, him trying to join them with the Scorn, but now it seems like he might have actually joined them. In the dialogue of the 4th week of the mission, you can hear Keitel saying that there was some kind of psionic vision of the future, and it said a lot of very interesting things. It said that the city will be destroyed, the ship stealer, which is Eramis, is going to be revived, the Leviathan will be reborn, and the Traveler will be infected by the darkness. So quite a lot to unpack there, but the city being destroyed, it makes sense. I mean, pretty much everyone in the game has been saying that the second collapse is going to happen, the city's going to be destroyed, so we've seen that quite a lot. The ship stealer, as in Eramis, going to be revived. I've mentioned that before. She's definitely going to come back at some point. She's basically frozen on Europa, so definitely an easy one to just bring back. The Traveler being infected by the darkness sounds really strange. I mean, we've seen things about saying it might leave us or it might go away or might be destroyed, but it being infected by the darkness, it sounds like something weird is going to happen in Final Shape. And the Leviathan being reborn also makes a ton of sense, and Zavala even said that he's going to locate it and they're going to work on trying to find it, which definitely also means it's going to come back at some point. The Leviathan returning is definitely a very obvious move for Bungie. I mean, just developer-wise, they have a ton of reason to bring it back. I mean, it's so big, you can obviously just make new areas we haven't been to yet. There could be new gameplay features. You can update some existing areas. You can bring back some of the loot, the themes of it. You can also bring back the firing test range, which a lot of people missed, including myself. But obviously Bungie is always looking for ways to repackage content, so that being in the vault right now, it's just an easy one. I think personally it's one of the best and most unique locations we've ever seen in Destiny. It's got so much potential, so definitely looking forward to seeing how it's going to be reborn. Of course, Calus is Keitel's dad, and they have a lot of beef right now, so they're definitely not going to be friends, and we're kind of allied with Keitel, so it does make sense if he's going to return as some kind of disciple of the Witness, and he's now on the dark side. Now, as far as the Traveler, like I said, we've seen a lot of things saying there's going to be a second collapse and the Traveler and the city is going to be attacked again, which does make sense with the theme and the name of Lightfall, but I'm guessing what's different this time is that we aren't dependent on the light, so we're just going to flip to use the darkness powers and somehow survive. But there's another 2 truths and 2 lies by Sabathun where she says, firstly, that the Traveler will leave, that the Traveler is going to fall, that there are more Travelers and that it's not the only one, and also the Traveler will choose another race. So of course 2 of these are true, 2 of these aren't, but it's hard to know which. It is a clever way by Bungie to kind of tease stuff and set things up for the future, but also leaves a bit of room for flexibility and change. So it is worded very openly, but we do know 2 of these things are going to happen. And either way, something bad is going to happen with the Traveler in the city. We don't know exactly what the details will be until Lightfall. Next up, let's talk about some of the latest with Bungie. There's been quite a lot of interviews and articles and even private data that's come out to do with their future plans for Destiny 2 and even their other games as well. So I want to touch on some of those interesting parts. The first thing is a very rare look at some data that Bungie normally keeps secret that they showed off at a developer conference. They talk about a bunch of developer-y stuff. It's actually the same conference where they showed off that 5 races image back in 2013, but this is the 2022 version. But it was interesting to see some of the numbers they normally keep to themselves. This first one is a KPI report, which means key performance indicators. So the numbers we can see is how close Bungie's predictions were to the actual numbers, which of course are redacted. So the daily active users, the DAU, was up 2%. The new players was up 12% what they predicted. The return rate up 9%. And the weekly win back, which I'm assuming is lapsed players or returning ones, was actually down 2% of what they predicted. And the really interesting ones is the gross revenue of the entire franchise, I'm guessing, is up 19% of what they predicted. So that is actually massive, 20% more than what they thought they would make, and 24% more revenue from the expansion itself. But the microtransactions actually down 5% of what they thought they would make, and the ARP DAU, which I'm not sure what that stands for, was down to 5%. So pretty interesting to see some actual numbers, but the takeaway from this is the expansion itself did make quite a lot of money, and the player base is looking quite healthy. Speaking of healthy player bases, they also showed the weekly active users of Destiny 1's first couple weeks versus Destiny 2, which is very interesting. As we know, both games had very rocky launches, but Destiny 1's recovered pretty nicely after Dark Below and then going into House of Wolves, which is not on this graph, but Destiny 2 just pretty much went straight down, had a nice spike for Curse of Osiris, and then went straight down after that, which was, as we know, if you're around during those times, quite a risky time for the franchise. It was after this, of course, Warmind kind of saved the day a little bit and brought some of the favor back, and then Forsaken would end up bringing back a ton of this. But it would be interesting to see more of this graph and how Forsaken versus Taken King performed, but interesting to see these graphs nonetheless. They also showed their development roadmap, so not when things are released, but when they're working on stuff internally, and you can see Beyond Light, Witch Queen, and Lightfall, and all these seasons underneath it. And Season of Opulence seems to be a mistake. It should be Season of Arrivals, I believe. You can see a lot of the redacted future content, but the interesting one a lot of people are talking about is this big chunk under Final Shape. They seem to be working in parallel. So this would be the Destiny 2 game. It wouldn't be any other game they're working on for a different franchise, but it's safe to assume this is whatever Bungie are working on after Final Shape in that Beyond section. So some kind of expansion that could come a year, maybe 2 after Final Shape. We know Bungie aren't going to end Destiny 2. It's going to keep going with more expansions, and this would assume would be it. There was also a pretty interesting interview on the Axios newsletter, and this was with the Destiny 2 general manager, Justin Truman, where they talked a little bit about the development, but also the interesting part was that he kind of implied that they only made Destiny 2 because of Activision. We know that Activision wanted them to make a Destiny 3 and Bungie didn't, which is kind of part of the reason why they split. They had different ideas for where the game wanted to be, but it is funny, but also not that surprising to hear they didn't really want to make Destiny 2 in the first place, and if it was up to them, there never would be a Destiny 2. They would have stuck with D1 and just continued to develop that, evolve it, and make it grow. It is interesting to wonder what would happen if Destiny 2 and that weird transition never happened, and they just kept going with the first game. Now, we also talked about the problems with this idea of adding to one game, and that of course is the file size and technical limitations, which leads to vaulting, which has been very controversial. But he was asked if they'll ever vault Beyond Light or Shadowkeep, which is a very interesting question, but he said they don't really know, and it is possible, similar to what we saw recently with Forsaken. I guess nothing is off the table. They could end up vaulting some kind of content, I guess what takes up the most space, but probably not the entire expansions. But this is the downside of keeping one continuous game. You do have to be getting rid of stuff all the time. There is no easy solution to this. The alternative of making Destiny 3 would mean the entire of Destiny 2 would be kind of irrelevant. Even though it's still playable there is no way to make one infinitely growing game that is also all relevant. I actually made a full video discussing why we'll probably never see a Destiny 3. You can click this video on screen to watch it. I went in depth and discussed both sides, but before you go, a like rating would be much appreciated, and do make sure you are subscribed if for whatever strange reason you are not. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.